That was the moment I stopped being the reasonable one. I'd been reasonable for 3 years. 3 years of biting my tongue at dinner when she made comments about my cooking. 3 years of pretending not to notice when she'd walk into a room and go silent the second she saw me. 3 years of telling myself she was just a kid working through something hard, that it would get better, that I just needed to be patient. And then my twin sister walked into my bakery at 7 in the morning with a split lip and a bruise spreading across her cheekbone like a storm cloud, and every bit of patience I had left dissolved on the spot. Her name is Evelyn. My sister. People who don't know us well can't tell us apart. Same height, same dark hair, same way of tilting our heads when we're confused. She's 29, same as me. We grew up in the same bedroom in a small house in Columbus, Ohio, shared clothes until we were 18, and talked on the phone almost every single day after we both moved out. She is the person I call when something falls apart. She is the person I call when something goes right. She is half of everything I know about myself. She walked in through the back door because she had a key. I was behind the counter pulling trays out of the oven, and when I turned around and saw her face, I dropped the tray. It clattered against the tile floor and I didn't even look at it. "What happened?" I said. She didn't answer right away. She sat down on one of the stools at the prep counter and pressed her fingers carefully along her jaw, testing something. Then she looked up at me with this expression that I recognized. She was trying to figure out how to say something without making me upset. "Tell me," I said. "It was Isla," she said. And there it was. Isla is my stepdaughter. She's 17. Her father, my husband, is a man named Patrick, and we've been married for 4 years. Patrick and Isla's mother divorced when Isla was 8, and Isla has lived with us full-time since she was 14, when her mother relocated to Portland for work and Isla refused to go. I understood that decision. I never held it against anyone. What I didn't understand and what I could never quite get Patrick to take seriously was the way Isla treated me from the day I moved into that house. It started small. Eye rolls. One-word answers. Leaving rooms when I entered them. I told myself it was grief or adjustment or just the ordinary friction of a blended family. Patrick told me the same thing, usually while reaching across the table to squeeze my hand like that was enough. "She just needs time," he'd say. "She'll come around." He said that for 3 years. She did not come around. What she did was get worse. By last winter, she'd started going through my things. Not taking anything, just going through them. I'd find my jewelry box moved, my closet rearranged, my books stacked differently on the shelves. When I asked her about it, she'd look at me with this flat, unbothered expression and say she didn't know what I was talking about. Patrick believed her every single time. 6 months ago, she started being rude to Evelyn. Evelyn came over for Sunday dinner at least twice a month. She and Patrick got along fine. He liked her dry sense of humor. And she was always careful to be warm to Isla, always tried to include her in conversation, always asked about school. Isla had started responding to her the same way she responded to me. Silence or short dismissive answers were these little sighs that made the air in the room feel heavy. I told Patrick it was getting worse. He told me Isla was stressed about her junior year. I stopped telling Patrick. What I didn't know, what I had no idea about, was that things between Isla and Evelyn had been escalating outside my line of sight. Evelyn hadn't told me because she didn't want to make things harder for me at home. That's the kind of person she is. She absorbs things to protect the people she loves. What I learned that morning, sitting across from her in my bakery while I held a bag of frozen blueberries to her cheek, was this. Evelyn had been at a coffee shop near our neighborhood the night before. Isla had come in with a group of friends, seen Evelyn, and, apparently deciding my sister was me, followed her to the parking lot. There, in front of 2 other teenagers who said nothing and did nothing, Isla shoved my sister against the driver's side door of her car, grabbed her by the collar, and told her to stay out of her father's house. When Evelyn told her she wasn't who she thought she was, Isla called her a liar and shoved her again, harder. Evelyn hit the side mirror on the way down. That was the split lip. That was the bruise. I sat there holding the frozen blueberries against my sister's face, and I felt something go very, very still inside me. I asked Evelyn why she hadn't called me the night before. It was late, she said. And I knew what you'd do. What would I do? She looked at me. You'd go home and confront her before you thought it through. And Patrick would take her side before he heard the full story. And you'd end up alone in this again. She wasn't wrong. She knows me better than I know myself sometimes. So what do you want to do? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I want her to understand that I'm not you. That she can't just decide someone deserves something and act on it. I want her to look at the person she actually attacked and feel the full weight of what she did. I thought about that. I thought about Patrick's face every time I tried to explain something he didn't want to hear. I thought about 3 years of being patient and reasonable and swallowing my frustration to keep the peace, and how none of it had made a single bit of difference. I have an idea, I said. It took me an hour to convince Evelyn. She said it was too risky. She said it was pointless. She said there were better ways to handle it. But underneath all of that, I could tell she wanted Isla to know. Really know what she'd done. And there was only one way to make that happen in a way. Isla couldn't deflect or deny or watch Patrick quietly excuse away. The plan was simple. Evelyn would go back to my house and pretend to be me. I know how that sounds. But here's the thing people forget about twins. We're not just similar looking. We know each other's habits, inflections, the way we hold our shoulders when we're tense. We've been switching places since we were 8 years old, back when we thought it was hilarious to confuse our teachers. We hadn't done it in years. But we hadn't needed to. I stayed at the bakery. I set up the small camera I use for the counter, the one for security purposes, the one that records to my phone, and I handed Evelyn my house key and my cardigan, which I'd been wearing that morning. I told her to go home, act like everything was normal, and wait. And if Patrick comes home before Isla, she asked. He's in meetings until 6, I said. He always is on Thursdays. And if Isla isn't there, she gets home at 3:15, I said. She always does. Evelyn looked at me for a long moment. You pay a lot of attention to the schedules of people who don't appreciate you. I didn't have an answer for that. She left at 11. I stayed at the bakery and tried to work, and mostly failed. I reorganized the display case twice. I made a new batch of lemon bars that I forgot to set a timer for and had to throw out. My phone felt like a stone in my apron pocket. At 3:32 she called me. I answered before the second ring. She's here, Evelyn said, her voice low. She walked in, saw me in the kitchen, and she went rigid, like she recognized something was off. What did she do? She asked me why I was home early. I said my afternoon client canceled. She bought it. She went upstairs. I exhaled. Okay. And? She came back down about 20 minutes later. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen and just stared at me. And then she said, Evelyn paused. She said, you look different. Something cold moved through me. What did you say? I said I was tired. And then I asked her how her day was. And? Evelyn was quiet for a second. She said, you know what you did. And I said, why don't you tell me? And then she started talking. This is the part that stayed with me longest, because what came out of Isla's mouth, standing in the kitchen of the house she'd lived in for 3 years, wasn't anger exactly. It wasn't even cruelty. It was a story she'd been telling herself for a long time about how I had taken her father away, how I had changed the structure of the house she grew up in, how she had been displaced from a life that was supposed to be hers. She talked about things I'd never known bothered her. A camping trip Patrick and I took the summer before last, a birthday dinner where I'd chosen the restaurant, the fact that I'd repainted the living room a different color than the one she'd grown up with. She said, she acts like she belongs here more than I do, and I just wanted her to know that she doesn't. Evelyn let her finish. Then she said very quietly, look at my face. Isla went silent. Look at it, Evelyn said again. Really look. There was a long pause on the phone. I could hear Isla's breathing. I'm Evelyn, my sister said. I'm her twin. You attacked me in a parking lot last night because you thought I was her. You grabbed me, you shoved me, and I hit a car mirror on the way down. I have a bruise on my cheekbone and a split lip. I came here today so you could see exactly what you did, not to her. To me. Someone who has never done anything to you. Someone who has tried, every single time I've been in this house, to be kind to you. The silence on the phone stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard it. A sound I hadn't expected. Isla crying. Not the kind of crying that's performance, the kind teenagers do sometimes when they're caught. This was something else. Ragged and sudden, like something had broken open. I thought she started. I didn't, I know, Evelyn said. That's why I'm telling you. I was sitting on a step stool behind the counter of my bakery and I put my hand over my mouth and I just stayed there. Evelyn stayed at the house until Patrick got home at 6. I had texted him that morning to tell him something happened that we needed to talk about and to come home at his usual time and not to call Isla before he got there. He texted back 3 question marks. I told him I'd explain when he arrived. He walked in at 6:07. Evelyn showed him her face. She showed him the screenshots from the bakery's security camera, my camera, which I'd been checking all afternoon, showing the timestamp from the night before, the parking lot footage I'd pulled from the coffee shop's public feed with the help of the shop owner, who'd heard the commotion and had already saved it herself. I got home at 6:30. Isla was sitting at the kitchen table. Her face was blotchy and her eyes were red and she looked, for the first time since I'd known her, young. Not like someone performing indifference, just young and scared and sorry in a way that hadn't been processed into words yet. Patrick was standing by the refrigerator. He looked like he'd been standing there for a while. I sat down across from Isla. I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at her and she looked at me and something passed between us that I didn't know how to name. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, I said finally. It happened. Your aunt has a bruised face because of a choice you made, and I need you to understand something. What you've been feeling. About this house, about your father, about me. None of that justifies putting your hands on someone. It doesn't matter who you thought she was. Isla nodded. She didn't speak. I don't know everything you've been carrying, I said. I know I've probably gotten things wrong. I know I moved into a space that was already yours, and I've never once asked you how that felt. That's on me. But hurting people is not the answer to that. It never is, and I'm not going to let it go unaddressed. Because you're 17 and you're having a hard year. Hard years don't work like that. Patrick said, from across the kitchen. She's going to see someone. A therapist. We talked about it while you were on your way home. I looked at him. He met my eyes, and he looked tired, and I could see in his face that he was beginning to understand how many times I had told him something was wrong, and he had found a way not to fully hear it. He didn't say that out loud, but I could see it. We talked for 2 more hours that night. Isla talked more than she had in 3 years combined, or at least more than she'd ever talked to me. She talked about her mother leaving. She talked about her mother leaving. She talked about how the house had felt after Patrick and I got together, like rearranged furniture she kept bumping into in the dark. She talked about how she'd started to see Evelyn as an extension of me, another person in the camp of people she decided were against her, even though Evelyn had never been anything but warm to her. She said, I don't know why I did it. I saw her and I wanted someone to feel what I was feeling. That's something to talk to a therapist about, I said. Not to me, not yet, but to someone who can help you figure out where it comes from. She nodded. Before she went upstairs, she stopped at the door of the kitchen and turned around. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, I'm sorry. About all of it. Not just last night. Everything. I didn't tell her it was fine because it wasn't, not entirely. I didn't tell her I forgave her because that was going to take time. What I said was, I hear you. And I'm not going anywhere. so we can figure out the rest. She went upstairs. I heard her door close. Patrick came to sit beside me at the table. He reached over and put his hand on mine, the same way he always did. But this time it felt different, like he was actually asking something, not just offering reassurance. "I didn't listen," he said. "No," I said. "You didn't. I'm going to do better." I looked at him. I've known him long enough to tell the difference between what he says and what he means, and this time they matched. "I know," I said. "Evelyn stayed for dinner that night. She sat across from Isla and they didn't talk much, but they were in the same room. At one point, Isla passed her the bread basket without being asked, and Evelyn said thank you, and that was it. That was the whole moment. But it was something. Later, after Isla had gone to bed and Patrick had fallen asleep on the couch, Evelyn and I sat on the back porch with cups of tea, and she told me I was stubborn and dramatic, and she couldn't believe I had talked her into this. "It worked," I said. "It almost didn't," she said. "But it did." She looked out at the yard. The porch light made a little circle of warmth in the dark. After a while she said, "She wasn't what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know, someone harder." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "She's just a kid who doesn't know what to do with what she's feeling." "She shoved you into a car mirror," I said. "I know." Evelyn glanced at me. "That's not an excuse. I'm just saying she's not irredeemable." I didn't think that before I went in there. I do now. I thought about that for a long time after she left. The therapist appointment started the following week. Isla has been going every Tuesday since. She doesn't tell me much about what they talk about, and I don't ask. What I do know is that the silences in the house have changed their shape. They're not the same silences as before. The ones that felt like something being held back, like pressure behind a door. These feel more like rooms that are still being filled. Last week, she asked me if I wanted help setting up for a birthday order I was filling for a client. I have a small catering business out of the bakery, and I'd brought some of the prep work home, and she walked to the kitchen and saw me working and just asked. I said yes. We made 4 dozen sugar cookies together, and she was actually good at the piping, which I told her. And she said her mom had taught her years ago, and then we talked for a little while about her mom and Portland and whether she'd want to visit before the end of the year. It wasn't a breakthrough. It was just an afternoon in the kitchen, two people figuring out how to exist in the same space without pretending. Some things don't resolve the way you want them to. Some doors take a long time to open, and you can't always tell from the outside if someone's going to reach for the handle. But you can leave the light on. You can make sure there's something worth coming in for. I'm not the same person I was the morning Evelyn walked into my bakery with a bruise on her face. I don't know exactly who I'm becoming. But I know that patience without honesty isn't patience. It's just avoidance with a nicer name. And I know that showing up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the outcome is uncertain, is the only way any of this ever gets better. She passed me the bread basket. It's a small thing, but I've learned that's usually where it starts. I keep coming back to the moment Evelyn walked through that back door, the way I dropped the tray without thinking. The way my body knew before my brain did that something had broken. There's a version of that morning where I do what I'd always done, absorb it, manage it, find a way to keep the peace. Tell Evelyn to file a report and let the adults handle it. Go home, sit across the dinner table from Isla, and say nothing. Because saying something had never seemed to make a difference before. I'd lived in that version for 3 years. I know exactly what it costs. What changed wasn't the bruise on my sister's face, though that's what cracks something open. What changed was the moment I understood that patience without honesty isn't a virtue, it's just a slow way of letting the wrong things become permanent. I had been so careful not to push too hard, not to seem demanding, not to make Patrick choose. And in all that carefulness, I had made space for something to grow that never should have been allowed to. Isla didn't become the girl who shoved my sister in a parking lot overnight. That took time. It took a lot of unchallenged moments, a lot of small behaviors that got smoothed over and explained away. I played a part in that too. Not the violent part. but the silence part. The looking the other way part. We don't always cause harm through what we do. Sometimes we cause it through what we decide not to say. What I've learned, really learned, not just understood in the abstract, is that real care requires the courage to be uncomfortable. Evelyn had that courage the day she sat across from Isla and said, "Look at my face." Not to humiliate her, not to win anything, but because there is something that camera footage and secondhand accounts can never do, which is put a person in direct contact with the weight of their own choices. That took a kind of intelligence that isn't about being smart. It's about being honest when honesty costs you something. And Isla, I think about her more than people might expect. She's 17 and she had built an entire story about her life that she believed completely. The story wasn't true, but the pain underneath it was real. Working through that, going to therapy every Tuesday, saying I'm sorry, and meaning it even when she didn't fully understand yet everything she was apologizing for. That is not easy. That is the kind of hard work that most adults avoid their whole lives. She's doing it at 17. I don't take that lightly. Patrick told me he was going to do better. I believed him. Not because it was a perfect answer, but because I've learned to tell the difference between a person shutting a door and a person finally turning to face one. He was facing it. None of us came out of that week unchanged. And I think that's right. I think that's how it's supposed to work. Growth doesn't happen in the easy moments. It happens when something breaks open and you have to decide, in the middle of the mess, who you actually want to be. She passed me the breadbasket. I'm not going to forget that.